All right, guys, our next guest is a special treat. He's a multiple world heavyweight champion of pro wrestling. He's an expert in MMA. He's even got his own gym. Right now, on the line, we have none other than Bill Goldberg himself. Goldberg, welcome to Submission Radio.
You know what? I'm very happy to be here.
Well, it's a huge honor for us, especially given how many years we've been watching you. You know, tell us, it's a brand new year, 2015. We're wondering, what does a multiple-time world champion get up to for New Year's?
Oh, Jesus. I got an 8-year-old son. So, we just hung out. He waited, or he stayed up as late as humanly possible. We launched a rocket right before he went to bed, and then probably my wife and I fell asleep at probably 11 p.m. I mean, that's the MO of a 48-year-old father with an 8-year-old son who's done just about everything in the world in past New Year's time. So,
Wow, yeah. I'd imagine some of those New Year's in Japan would have been pretty crazy. Bill, let's go back in time a little bit. For fans who don't know, let's go back a little bit in time to before your pro wrestling days. You had a very good career in football. You were very good in college. You played NFL. Let the fans know that don't really know your story. What kind of motivated you to get into the sport of pro wrestling and, have a go at it?
Mine's a totally different story from the norm. I wasn't the kid that grew up and idolized professional wrestling because what filled that void for me was the fact that I had two older brothers who played college football, major college football, and I wanted to do nothing but follow in their footsteps. That was a dream of mine since, the first time I can remember, and so that was my goal. Obviously, to make it to major college football and then make it into the NFL. I'll fast forward. I was able to be lucky enough to have had a pretty good college career and make a couple of years in the NFL. Unfortunately, I got injured, had to retire. And then in all honesty, I had no direction. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. My dream was crushed. I had no aspiration to go out and earn a living doing anything other than what I loved, and that was taken away from me. And unfortunately, I had to figure out what the hell was going on in my life, and I did a number of things, none of which were groundbreaking by any stretch of the imagination career-wise. And I would being a professional football player in Atlanta, Georgia, and not being married, the nightlife in Georgia is quite extensive, especially Atlanta, and so I would frequent a number of establishments that were frequented by a lot of the professional wrestlers. And I had introductions. We big guys usually cross paths, and they're interested about the other guys, so they're inquisitive, and so they ask questions. And I was playing football at the time. They were wrestling, and they kind of tried to the soft recruiting pitch to me. And in all honesty, I mean, that's something that I never envisioned myself doing, and in retrospect, I mean, to me, it was an embarrassment because I was a professional athlete, and why did I want to, strip down to my underwear and act like I'm beating someone up as opposed to truly doing it? Well, truly doing it wasn't an option because mixed martial arts had just taken off at that point, and there was absolutely no money in it. And so, my options were kind of running out, in that I didn't have a desire to try anything else. And I said, what the hell? This UFC mixed martial arts is just coming onto the scene, and I truly believed that it was going to be the biggest thing going. I thought it was cool as hell, and if I thought my thought process was that if I liked to watch it, then I would think a lot of other people would like to watch it. And so I assumed a character that I could look myself in the mirror and be proud of. It wasn't a far departure by any stretch of imagination from my true self. And so, therefore, I didn't have to act as much as the normal person. And, I was lucky enough to find something that fit. I approached WCW. Well, they approached me a number of times, and then I actually called Jim Ross, and I had a meeting with Vince McMahon. I did not like that meeting with Vince McMahon. The next day, I called Eric Bischoff, and I said, listen, I'm going to make a decision here, and the World Wrestling Federation has a contract on the table for me, and that's not where I want to be. So push came to shove. I told him that, hey, I'm not going to, I remember the quote like it was yesterday, I'm not going to be one of those $500 a week throw around the ring dudes. I'm going to come in and make a difference. And to have known that, to have foreseen the difference that I actually made was, unbelievable. I never would have done that. But it was something that I applied all of my past tendencies, my ability to work longer than somebody else, but my ability to put a lot of thought process into what I was doing and try to make it, appealing to everybody else. And I'm anal retentive. I do things to perfection. So I put a lot of time and a lot of effort, and a lot of people helped me mold this, not necessarily mold the character, because the character was my idea, but they helped me flourish as a character. I mean, they taught me everything. I had no concept of professional wrestling whatsoever. And, the next thing you know, people are starting to chant my name, and the rest is history. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because everybody obviously knows the story, your huge streak in WCW and you being an icon. I'm very curious because it sounds like not really that you were close to going to the WWF, but, there's that what if. What was the meeting like, and what did they offer you? Did they just want you to be a jobber, or what was expected of you from the WWF?
No, it was the Vince McMahon persona that I didn't like at the time. I mean, he was overbearing, and I didn't feel as though leaving Georgia and going where I really didn't know anybody, that they would have my best interest at heart. Though I don't believe any of them have your best interest at heart. I believe it's a self-serving, business. But at the end of the day, the Steiner brothers, I was fairly close to them. DDP, I met a number of times, and Sting and Lex Luger and Bagwell, and so I saw those guys all the time. So I had a familiarity with them. And also, what turned me off was my first step into Vince's office. I realized that I hadn't brought my agent with me, and I really didn't understand how the wrestling business went, and I didn't have any representation in that meeting. So I made the statement that, oh shit, pardon me. I said,
you can say whatever you want, Bill. Just letting you know.
I said, shit, man, I forgot my agent. And the secretary looked at me, and she had this ghastly look on her face. She goes, oh, no, Vince McMahon doesn't like to deal with agents. And so, that's a negative, for sure, because that's the guy who wants to take advantage of the talent.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I had the business sense from playing football, and I knew better than to go in there and hand somebody my likeness. It wasn't going to happen.
Now, when you first began your run in WCW, the fans would obviously count your record. It was a pretty cool idea. You began at 1-0, 10-0, and then eventually, I think, around about 173 wins in a row. I'm just wondering, who came up with that whole idea behind that angle? Was it yourself, or was it Eric Bischoff? Who was that?
No, I can't take credit for it by any stretch of imagination. Firstly, I believe it was organic. It was something that took a life of its own. I think Tony Schiavone and Heenan and Mike Tenay had a lot to do with that. I think, it may have been Tenay, but I definitely won't be taking credit for that one.
Absolutely. And, during that time, it was the Monday Night War. The ratings for both shows were just absolutely insane. It was absolutely different to what it is now. What was it like being at the forefront of all of that? What was it like being a part, of that huge wrestling boom and, really taking over the world, with pro wrestling?
It was awesome. I can't say that I can compare it against anything because that's all I knew. I was there at the pinnacle of the business. I also am not really qualified to give anybody an answer in that area because I never saw the bad times. I never had to wrestle, in front of 20 people and jump off a building for $25 just to get on TV. I'm not saying that in a pompous way. I'm saying that in a way that it actually happened. And I was extremely lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. A lot of things were in my favor, and the timing of the Monday Night Wars had everything to do with it. And, I think there were some people there at the time that I think the business has, like I said, a bunch of people who are self-serving, and they like to step on others on their way up. But, I was always conscious about that and trying to be protective of my character. And, I learned from some of the best.
And when people look back on your career, it's a culmination of spears and jackhammers and lots of highlights. But, a really big moment in on itself was obviously your match with Hulk Hogan in Atlanta in front of 44,000 people. How did that come together? We heard rumors that Hogan put heat rub under one of his armpits and put you in a headlock. In a headlock. What was the whole night like for you?
Well, the deal is it's like this. I heard about the announcement watching it live on Thursday Night Thunder.
Wow.
J.J. Dillon announced it, and I was like, what? Okay. I guess, So, and as far as, Hogan and the Icy Hot, absolutely. That's one of those tricks that they do to rookies or young boys or whatever the hell you want to call them, to try to catch them off guard, see how they handle the pressure. Yeah, it didn't bother me. It pissed me off, but, it didn't bother me. I mean, stuff like that didn't have to be done to me because I'd been there and done that in another, I'll never forget. I'm riding with Kevin Nash and, what's his name? One of the wrestlers, God, he had the flock, Raven.
Yeah.
Raven,
right.
Riding with us, and I go to sit in the front seat, and he goes, "Oh, hold on a second." He goes, "You got to pay your dues." And I turn around and I said, "Listen, bitch, I paid my dues by being on the football field and having two 320-pound dudes trying to rip my head off every play." So if you don't want to consider that as paying my dues, then you and I are going to have to go down. So it was a different deal. I mean, I had to play their game and always know that, people were trying to get at me from behind. But, it is what it is.
Absolutely. And, just on the other side of that coin, around 2000, 2001, WCW was quickly going downhill. Bill, just wondering, what was it like being a part of the company near the end? Because there was that one booking decision, I think, that really fans didn't understand that WCW did, which was trying to turn you heel, I believe, near the end there. What was it like being a part of that? I imagine it'd be kind of frustrating.
Well, I mean, yes and no. The reality is that if you're 100% bought into the world of professional wrestling, and you understand what's going on, then you get the fact that a heel turn would be a monumentous occasion if done properly. And, between you and I and everybody who's listening to this, I would have much rather enjoyed working as a heel personally, but I didn't like what it would have done to my fans. My fans, the night that they turned me heel, I had a Make-A-Wish girl in the back. She was a cancer. She was under chemotherapy at the time. And, I had to go out and I had to beat up Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who just came back from cancer.
Mm.
And I come in the back and she's bawling and she doesn't get it. She doesn't understand. And it touched me, and like I said, I think it showed that I may have lacked a little bit of company sense, but at the end of the day, if I ruined one kid's dream of me being their superhero, then that was one kid too many for me. So, I believe a part of the demise of WCW was the dipshit, that we got from WWE, the writer,
Vince Russo.
Vince Russo. I mean, he was a moron, through and through. He may have been successful at putting, wrestling shows together in the past, but I believe he was a plant. I think he was sent down to turn us, to make us go downhill. And I thought his ideas were, some of his ideas were asinine and ridiculous. And he and I didn't have, we didn't see eye to eye in anything whatsoever. And so I think he was a contributing factor to the demise of the company, along with the merger. And, there was a lot of things. I mean, I was injured at the end. So, I mean, I watched the last episode from my television.
Wow. And excuse me. It's interesting to hear you say that about your fans. I believe I have read in the past that one of your biggest reasons for coming over to the WWE was because the fans wanted it. And it was cool because we got to see you mix it up and have some dream matches, and also spear the hell out of guys like Christian, a 3-minute warning. However, it didn't feel like the WWE really used you the right way and sort of tried to force you to change your style. What was that period like with the WWE for you?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Let's look at it right now. Let's look at it in real time. Wrestling moves are hollowed entities. You don't take moves from other people. Now, when I was at the WWE and they wanted people to start spearing people, and they wanted me, they actually had the nerve to ask me to stop spearing people.
Wow.
And now you look at the company, and it's the setup move for, 40% of the guys, girls included, part of the McMahon family, for God's sakes. So I don't believe that they took that from me or chose to use that because it was a great move. I think they wanted to water down my legacy. So looking at that from today's standpoint, and then looking back as to how they used me, with me being one of the guys that was kicking their ass in the Monday Night Wars, and being on the other side, and me telling Vince no in the beginning and going to the opposing team, and then when he buys them out, that I'm acquired. It was just a totally different deal. I wasn't a product of Vince McMahon. And at the end of the day, they may be the best business entity in the wrestling business, but they're not the end all, because they because of their ego, they forewent a bunch of opportunities that we could have making a lot of money at. And let's be honest. I mean, I beat Brock Lesnar in my last match, and if I had any desire to stay there whatsoever, if it was any type of a positive, I would have stayed, but it wasn't. So it's just it was a negative part of my life. I just didn't enjoy being there.
And it's interesting that you touch on that Brock Lesnar match, because fans were so excited. It was WrestleMania 20, and it all came together very, very well. Great build up. But the match itself, I think it was a little bit of a strange situation. I believe around that time, Brock decided he was leaving the company, and it was sort of around when the match happened. How did you enjoy your WrestleMania 20 experience in the match itself with Brock? And obviously Stone Cold ran in at the end. Did you enjoy that match?
Oh, hell no. I was miserable. I tried to repress it. He and I both. The reality is it could have been one of the biggest matches in their history if done properly. But nobody cared. Nobody cared. And since they didn't care, I mean, when I looked across the ring at him, he didn't care. I didn't care. We just wanted to go. And that was a shame. They could have made a lot of money at it, but they didn't. So, I feel really bad about it for the fans, but they shit on it too. I mean, they could have not done what they did, and we probably would have had a much better match, because we wouldn't have been as pissed off. I thought he was going to try to kill me, and I wanted to kill him at the same time, like for real, because we were so mad at what was going on. We just didn't have anything else to do but beat on each other. So, and we're good friends. I love Brock to death. He's one of my best friends in the business. And let me rephrase that. He's one of my only friends in the business. And, it was a shame. You had two absolute physical monsters with great characters going against each other, and it turned out to be a shitfest.
I always thought that the match that I think even though we didn't get to see the greatest Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar match, the match that we did kind of see that was similar was you versus Scott Steiner in WCW, which was another similar two monsters going at it. I want to also touch on Brock Lesnar. There's a lot of rumors at the moment that he's going to the UFC, and the WWE seem prepared for it. What do you think about Brock going back to the UFC, and do you think he can have another successful run?
I think so. I think if Brock, I haven't trained with Brock. I don't know exactly what he does, but, if I were him, I'd spend 75% of my time on stand-up. You know, I believe that if he does it properly, he can go back and dominate. But if he doesn't do it properly, he'll go back, and the same thing will happen, you know, towards the end of his tenure. It's all about growing. It's all about being able to look yourself in the mirror and look at your deficiencies and be man enough and be egoless, you know, to go out and put yourself in negative situations in training so that you can learn. I do that 3 days a week right now. I'm sitting out in front of my Muay Thai gym, my co-owned Muay Thai gym right now. I'm getting ready to go in and train, and I'm a perfectionist, and there are a lot of things that I can't do, and those are the things that I try to work on so that I'm well-rounded, so that there are no holes in my game. It's all about your ego. It's all about preparation, and let's be honest, he's healthy now, so you never know. I mean, I hope the best for him. I just want him to bring his ass down here and train with me a little bit.
You know, Bill, you mentioned how many times a week you train, and, you know, we imagine there'd be some great, you know, training sessions there at the gym. I believe it's called Extreme Power Gym. We hear some great things about it, by the way. You know, people say never when it comes to martial arts. We've had so many pro wrestlers and athletes go into martial arts like Brock Lesnar, Batista, Bobby Lashley, and CM Punk. And, you know, we know you have a lot of injuries, but would a fight be out of the question for yourself? Not even, you know, a UFC level fight, but just a fight where you can sort of just have an amateur fight just to show off some of the training that you've been doing over the years in MMA.
Absolutely. That is in the back of my mind, and it has been for the past couple months. And, you know, hey, I'm 48 years old. The reality is that I have been, you know, it's not like I didn't retire from the NFL because of an injury. So my body is torn to shreds. But I continue to have the desire to compete. I talked to Hoist Gracie this morning. Same thing with him. You know, warriors never die. You know, they just get older and you know, things change a bit. But, you know, the spirit dies. Therefore, every day I look for some type of physical test. And, you know, whether it's putting myself against myself, which is my own worst critic and no question my biggest adversary, you know, if I can please myself, then I guarantee you I can go out there and have some fun with people. You know, Rampage and I were supposed to train earlier in the week. He unfortunately has the flu. You know, we got a number of guys at the gym that like to trade punches. That's a lot of fun. And, you know, we got a big autograph session at the Magic City Comic-Con in Miami coming up this weekend, and did an interview yesterday with the Miami Station and put it out there that I want to train some Muay Thai. So, you know, American Top Team threw an invitation out. You know, a number of other people did. And, hey, man, I don't have an ego. I've done more in my life than 90% of the people could ever imagine doing. And so I don't have an issue. Go on YouTube right now and look at the video that I posted of Jimmy Pedro, the Olympic judo coach, U.S. Olympic judo coach, tossing me around like a doll. Well, Jimmy weighs about 180 pounds. And if I had an ego and if I was worried about, you know, what people think, I wouldn't put that online. But I thought it was great, and I thought it would be killer to be able to feel that from a professional, from one of the best in the world. I have no problem training with anybody and getting beaten by anybody, because anytime you get beat in a ball, you know, the good ones are the ones that prosper from that, and they learn and they get big, they get better, they grow in the knowledge department. You know, I asked, it wasn't Brock, but one of the Muay Thai fighters, one of the events, you know, years and years ago that I commentated. One of the fighters on the card, it was the Dynamite card that was at the LA Coliseum. One of the fighters, Melvin Manhoef. Okay,
oh, yeah.
Everybody in the MMA world knows Melvin. Mm. Well, you know, Melvin goes out and he's pound for pound, you know, one of the gnarliest Muay Thai practitioners, kickboxers. I don't even want to say kickboxers. Muay Thai fighters in the world. He goes out and he gets choked out in the first round. I think it was the first round, by a guy who'd never strike in his life. And at the end of the fight, when we went in the back after the event, I didn't know him from Adam. but I felt as though he had, he could do nothing but respect me because I was coming from, an objective opinion. And I asked him, I said, pound for pound, who can beat you in the world on their feet? He goes, nobody. I said, well, why the fuck? Oh, here we go. Sorry. I said, why the hell why don't you train at least 50% of your regiment on the ground so that you have a rudimentary idea of how to defend, how to take down, a number of submissions, so that you're prepared. This isn't glory. This is MMA, and there's a huge difference. So my idea is if Brock takes a step back, looks at it from the outside in, assesses his ability and his deficiencies and properly attacks them, I think he's almost unstoppable. But, that remains to be seen. I don't know what he's going to do, and he's a good businessman, and the decision that he makes will be based upon the period and the story.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about Melvin because he's actually had a few tough losses, especially recently at Bellator. He got knocked out by Schilling.
I was there.
Oh, you were there?
That was the only fight on the damn card that I wanted to see. That's the only reason why I went.
Wow.
I didn't go to see Tito. Are you kidding me? Those guys, that was ridiculous. I went to see Schilling and Manhoef because that's what I do now. I do Muay Thai, and those guys, totally different fighters, totally different styles, but I knew it was going to be a train wreck. So, and it was. So that's where the excitement lies for me now.
I like to think that obviously, we do our research before we have our guests on. I like to think we're pretty well versed in terms of knowledge. I actually didn't realize that you did Muay Thai. That was a sort of big shock to me. I'm just wondering, how long ago did you start training Muay Thai? And in your opinion, I know you're probably not going to talk yourself up, but how good is Bill Goldberg?
No, I'm not worth a damn. Not yet. But I don't know of many 270-pound guys that train Muay Thai 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So, if you want to put me in my own, in the proper weight class, and how am I there? I don't know. We'll see this weekend when I go down, or next weekend when I go down to the American Top Team. I'm not very good because I consider the biggest thing about martial arts that I love is the fact that there's nobody on the planet that knows everything. There's always something to learn. There's always room to grow. There's always a different technique. There's always a way to mold something into your own. And so, I'm on a personal quest of myself. Would I love to display my abilities? I don't know. I've thought about it, but who knows? That's not why I'm doing this. That's not what's driving me. What's driving me is a personal desire to challenge myself daily. And it's a lot of fun. I'm not very flexible. I've gained flexibility, throughout the years. I've lost a lot of weight so that I'm much more efficient and much quicker in the ring. And my cardio is way up. I went, 7 rounds the other day, 7 rounds the other day. I don't know. Here in about 30 minutes, I'll probably do another 7. But,
wow.
I've been, right before I went to Japan to wrestle for Hustle One, I took it upon myself to start training Muay Thai. I, prior to that, owned, the largest MMA gym in the country for a little while back in Atlanta. And we had a couple of Muay Thai guys there. And I took a couple lessons from them, but I never took it seriously. When I came here to Southern California and I was preparing to go to Japan, I wanted to have as many tools as humanly possible just in case one of those guys wanted to be the first guy to knock Goldberg out. My second match was against the judo player, 6'5", Ogawa. Silver medalist in the Olympics for Japan in judo. And, this guy, he didn't have the best reputation, and I wanted to be ready for him. So I started taking private lessons then. I think I took them for, 6-8 months then, and then I'd take them sporadically over the next probably 5 to 10 years. And there was a movie that I was prepping for in August of last year. And it was a mixed martial arts movie. It never came through. But there were going to be a number of guys that I were going to have fight scenes with that were pro fighters. and I didn't want to have a drop off a bit by people viewing my skills next to them. So I started training 3 days a week, and I haven't stopped since August. I took 2 weeks off for Christmas, for holidays, and I'm continuing to train. And if I wasn't obsessed with it, I wouldn't even consider training while I'm on vacation down in Miami. But I mean, I want to learn from different people. I mean, I've got probably the best instructor I could ever have in the world here with me as my partner in the gym. It was his gym, it's his baby, Ruben Rawl, and he's 6-degree black tiger Muay Thai. I think he's one of the 2 black tiger instructors in the U.S. that have his credentials, and I mean he's a go-to guy, and what better guy to learn from? And he's my partner, he's my very good friend. And we have a lot of fun, and we're both older, and we're both combat guys. He was 14 years in the military and ex-gunny in the Marines, and he likes physicality just as much as the next guy.
Yeah.
But so he's a great guy to train from. My son trains there 3 days a week, and for me, it's other than the weight room used to be my haven, but since I've hurt myself so many times. I can't do the things that I really like to do in the weight room when I'm in there. I can't lift the weight that I used to lift. But what I do lift is fairly substantial still. And once you combine that with proper technique in Muay Thai, that could be one hell of a dangerous, package, except for the fact that I'm 48 years old. But you know what? Age is nothing, man. Age is a number. So I'm going to continue to do what I do and have fun doing it.
Bill, I'm going to get a lot of hate if I don't ask you this question, because I know we have a lot of grappling and jiu-jitsu guys listening to our show every week. So I have to ask you this. What's Bill Goldberg like on the ground? Have you been training as hard in your jiu-jitsu and your wrestling and your judo as well, or is it just more of an interest in stand-up at the moment?
No, it's just stand-up. I haven't trained 1 second on any of the above disciplines that you've mentioned. If I looked at it as a business venture, then yeah, no doubt. If I was getting in an MMA competition, I'd be smart enough to spend ample time in each discipline. But the reality is, for the 15th time that I've said that little cliche, spending a lot of time on the ground isn't very conducive to all my injuries. I'd much rather strike on my feet and use my power, use my quickness, my agility, my athleticism as a 270-pound guy, and not ever have to go to the ground. If I was to do an exhibition match, it would be Muay Thai. It wouldn't be MMA.
It's very interesting, especially considering your background. I think if fans heard about that tomorrow, I think they'd be very surprised. There's another guy who's coming into the MMA world, actually the UFC. You probably already know who I'm talking about. His base is more Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and of course I'm talking about CM Punk. I'm just wondering, what's your take on CM Punk deciding to fight in the UFC, and do you think he can be successful?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think anybody can be successful if they take the proper route in prior to stepping in that cage. I wanted to talk to Hoist a lot about CM, because I'm not going to pass judgment on anyone until I know 100% of their background, until I watch what they're doing. I want to see what his stand-up's like. I think it was a great PR move for the UFC. It's no secret that I'm a huge fan of Pride fighting over the UFC, hands down, because of the entertainment factor. At the end of the day, what Pride, I think the biggest difference between Pride and the UFC is the pageantry of Pride, the over-the-top pageantry of it, the ability to watch kind of like the Street Fighter mentality of a very unique individual versus someone who's completely polar opposite of them. They still had matchups like the original UFC. Gracie and Akibono, Hong Man Choi and who's the baseball player?
Jose Canseco.
Jose Canseco. So as ridiculous as those fights are, And as unprepared and unqualified as some of these people are, it's huge entertainment. And if they're willing to go in and do it, then I'm willing to pay for it. And you know, I've been in the audience, and I was at the commentating booth at 2 of those events, and they're unbelievable. I had a great time there. And you know, the fans are wonderful, and it's the pageantry, and it's, I guess it all boils down to, at the end of the day, it's the fact that you're not watching 2 guys that are almost you know, very similar to each other. If you're in MMA these days, you'd be an absolute moron not to train equally in all disciplines. But for me, that makes everybody look the same. So I honestly, you know, don't enjoy it nearly as much as I used to. It doesn't hold a candle to it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Bill, because, you know...
But hold on, but at the same time, and I expressed this yesterday on the air somewhere, that doesn't mean that I don't respect and admire the ability of these new age fighters. Because you look at a Jon Jones, you look at a Miles Jury, you look at guys who are so well rounded, there's not one thing that stands out as their you know, their number one art. But that's the wave of the future. That's what people have to do. But what that does is it makes them like everybody else. So.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned Japan, because a lot of your fans here in Australia and our listeners around the world, they didn't really get a chance to watch you wrestle in Japan, but you were there for a while. You know, just wondering, what was your experience like wrestling in Japan? And, you know, we know that a lot of wrestlers went over and fought in Pride, you know, and sort of went back and forth. Did you, at any point in your time over in Japan, get an offer to fight in Pride or, you know, in any of those K1 events or anything like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, firstly, wrestling over in Japan was my goal. When I got into wrestling, I saw what Hogan was able to do over in Japan, and in all honesty, I like the style better because it's stiffer. And, you know, they're not going to cry to their mommy if you hit them. You know, it makes it that much more believable. It makes it a much more entertaining event if you actually see stuff going on, as opposed to them insulting your intelligence and you miss a guy by 5 feet and he acts like you punched him in the face.
Yeah.
Excuse me. They like it stiff in Japan, and I love that, and that catered to my style. And so I very much enjoyed it over there. The fans were wonderful. You know, like it's the Hustle One was where I wrestled was owned by Pride, and did they want to entice me to fight? Absolutely. Was it something at the time where the money was there? Not comparatively for me. So if there's no question that I would have taken the mixed martial arts route if the money was there back in the day. But at the time that I got over to Japan, and I'd already sustained so many injuries, and I was getting older, and it just wasn't a smart move for me. So I try to look at things from a business sense, and I try not to, you know, do anything that would ever demean or deteriorate my product, and not allow me to look myself in the mirror. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. You know, Bill, we had Randy Couture on the show last week, and we were talking about CM Punk, and I guess this kind of applies to, like, you know, any other pro wrestlers and shoot fighters, but he mentioned how even though he may not have professional fighting experience, he obviously has a certain level of fitness from all his years in wrestling. Do you think there are any skills in pro wrestling that transcend into MMA?
I think the basic knowledge of body mechanics and the reality of submissions, and yeah, I mean, a lot of guys over there have a little bit of a background, but they only have the amount of background that they need to pull the character off. There's no other reason to have more background in a martial art unless you use it. And I don't know. I mean, pro football players, in my opinion, are the best athletes in the world. So you look at a Matt Mitrione, you look at a Brandon Schwab, you look at, you know, a number of guys who, you know, and others have made the transition. And you're seeing that with a Jon Jones. I mean, Jon Jones is an example. He's got a brother, maybe one brother or two brothers that played in the NFL. And And there's no reason Jon couldn't have done that if that's what he chose to do. But he grew up in a time when mixed martial arts was something that was appealing to him. Therefore, he forewent his opportunity to play one of the 4 traditional sports. And there's a guy right there that could have played probably any sport he wanted to, and he chose to pick MMA. And that's the difference. If the other sports weren't offered, the level of MMA fighting would go right through the roof. I mean, just be honest. I mean, look at some of these professional football players. Look at their ability. Look at J.J. Watt from the Houston Texans, a guy who's like 6'6", 295 pounds, who can do stuff physically that is absolutely ridiculous for any human being, let alone a guy that size. You don't have guys like that in MMA because they can make money elsewhere. But nowadays, you do, because it's a viable option for them to make a financial windfall and succeed. So, it's just another option now. I mean, it's the 5th sport. And truthfully, one thing that I don't like about it is, I believe it's ruined a number of kids that were going to go to college, but think that the MMA dream is out there, and they can put a shirt on from a gym and go in and train a couple times and think they're going to be the next freaking UFC heavyweight champion. It doesn't work like that. So it's professional wrestlers, definitely they have something to offer, but at the end of the day, wrestling's a tough deal. You're on the road a lot, you're hurt a lot, you have the ability to work around injuries, but a lot of the times if you're one of the main guys, it's dependent. The company's success is dependent upon your participation. So there's a lot of athletes out there, and I just think that a lot of them are going to MMA now. And are they the best athletes in the world? No, I don't believe so by any stretch of imagination. Look at rugby. It's some of those guys that have played rugby their entire life to pick up MMA when they're 15 years old, and think of how they'd be.
Absolutely. They just naturally get all the takedowns. It's interesting that you mentioned, these kids going over, because it's true, they are going over and, their thoughts are, I'm going to go over to MMA and become an instant millionaire, when in reality, unfortunately, the way the landscape is, most of these guys are getting 10 and 10 to fight and are only fighting a few times a year, so they're not actually getting as huge of a salary, as these kids think. You're a smart guy. You talked about the fact that, you had your agent in the room for most discussions in your pro wrestling career. Do you think that MMA fighters are getting paid enough at the highest level in places like UFC?
No, not at all. But, I mean, it takes a while for it to grow. I believe, and I've said it before, that Vince McMahon is like a godfather to Dana White. I mean, Dana, whether he'll admit it or not, I believe, he's followed Vince's footsteps in a lot of dealings. It's ironic that, WCW went crumbling down. Vince monopolized the business pretty much, and then, boom, that's kind of what the UFC did. Strikeforce, Pride, acquired them all. And they're the big kid on the block, and, I truly believe that competition, increases the level of the product. Without it, it's stale. So, there you have it.
Now, Bill, before we do something fun with you called the Submission Radio Tap Out Round, we want to also bring up your podcast. We're fans, obviously, on Podcast One. You without, and there's a lot of good podcasts out there, but you without a doubt are a very talented interviewer and host. We've listened to another number of the episodes, and you've got the ability to sort of bring out the different side of guests, which appear across many of your episodes. What motivated you to get involved in the podcast world?
Still to this day, it's something I'm very uncomfortable with. I don't think I'm very good at it. I believe that, my show, it just absolutely pales in comparison compared to, like Austin's show, like Jim Ross's show, like Jericho's show, because I'm not a wrestling guy at heart. I'm a football guy at heart, and through my travels, I've met some wonderful people, and I met people from all walks of life. And to give people the ability to listen to me having a conversation with Hoist Gracie and me making fun of him, that's pretty funny. I think that's pretty damn entertaining. Me talking to Tony Stewart, who's one of the best NASCAR drivers in the history of the world, you know, is my first guest, and me, you know, he's my little brother, man. I rag on him as much as anybody. Couture, everybody, same thing. So I feel as though I can, you know, I had Jim Kelly, who, you know, Hall of Fame quarterback, going through God knows what he's been through in 2014 with the cancer. You know, and I follow that up. I got Tim Brown coming on next week, you know, first wide receiver to ever win the Heisman Trophy. Well, if you ask me, and I'm not trying to be a dick, I think that's a much more interesting interview than listening to some professional wrestler that everyone else in the world has interviewed. So, you know, going into it, it was just something for me to give. I try to give something, but, you know, to people something different. Like I say, my podcast it pales in comparison to what those other guys do, because they cater to their current fan base. I try to cater to everybody. And like I said, I'm not a wrestling guy, and I don't say that in a malicious way, or I don't say it to be a jerk. But it is what it is. It doesn't interest me to the point where these guys, it interests them. Nor do I have the stories, because, you know, coming from a professional football background, I've been there and done that. And so most of the time when I wrestled, I went and I did my job and I left. I don't have a lot of these on-the-road stories with all these guys for the past 20 years, and I was working in this territory, and the hell with that, man. I was kicking ass on the football field, you know, rubbing shoulders with, you know, guys like Eric Dickerson and you know, Andre Reed, Andre Rison, Jim Kelly, you know, Dan Marino, Jim Elway, you know, Deion Sanders, Herschel Walker. I mean, to me, that's reality. So I knew coming in that it wasn't going to be a hugely successful endeavor for me, but that's not why I got into it. I got into it to show people a different side of me and to share with them my experiences throughout my years of being Goldberg, not being the professional wrestler Goldberg, but by being Goldberg.
Absolutely. You know, I think you're a bit hard on yourself. Your show is very, very good. You know, we're pretty critical on these shows, so you should be very proud of yourself. And before we jump to the tap-out round, Bill, you know, we are getting a lot of tweets right now from fans, and they sort of want to know, what are your thoughts on this whole Jon Jones situation? You know, obviously he's a fantastic fighter, but, you know, some big news came out earlier this week about, unfortunately, you know, him having some issues with some illicit drugs. And, you know, a guy like yourself who's been around the pro wrestling industry, which, you know, had some cases of its own of guys struggling a little bit with, you know, drugs themselves. What are your thoughts on this situation? And do you think Jon Jones comes back stronger from this experience?
I think, you know, like, when I saw Dana White's comment about this is the best thing that could have happened, you know, I was appalled. But once you sit back and think about it, for Jon Jones the person, this is the best thing that could ever happen. Do I like Jon Jones as a fighter? Was I cheering for Jon Jones against Cormier? No. Do I appreciate his ability? Do I think he is pound for pound the gnarliest MMA fighter on the planet? Absolutely. Can I appreciate the fact that he's made it to that level by training his ass off and being unique and being innovative? Absolutely. Do I like him as a person on a post-fight interview? Absolutely not. Do I like the eye pokes and do I like the knee kicks? Absolutely not. I think that's cheap. I think he can get away with I think he can be a much better fighter and be a much better champion and be a much better example for people to follow if he sat back and just understood that some of the things that he says and some of the things that he does need to be tweaked a little bit. And hey, man, I don't know Jon, but I love him to death, man, because he's a guy that worked his ass off to make it to the top of his field. As a human being, I want the best for Jon Jones. UFC, on the other hand, what they did with this situation, until I get 100% of all the information straight in front of me so I can look at it, I think, you know, passing judgment, not really knowing everything, I think they dropped the ball because, you know, they've been fighting for 20 years to try to get a positive impression from everyone, from trying to get into New York State, from trying to get into these states that John McCain kept them out of years and years ago. I think it will be in their best interest to do the right thing. And, you know, the definition from the committee about in-season testing and what in-season means is absolutely appalling. It's ridiculous. And it's a technicality, and it's something that, you know, if they would have pulled Jones from the fight, God knows how many millions of dollars they would have lost and had to refund. I can't tell you how long it's been that I have been wanting for a fight to happen, you know, such as Cormier and Jon Jones. You know, Lawler and Hendricks, I definitely wanted to see that one. But, I mean, there's other fights that you want to see. But, you know, if they would have taken that one off the plate, then that was a huge loss for them in a lot of ways. So I understand from a business standpoint why nothing was done, but it doesn't look real good from the outside looking in. So I think something has to be done. I know Jon Jones is going to come back bigger and better. And, you know, look at it from a wrestling standpoint. A lot of people thought he was a dick beforehand, though he was a great fighter. I made the analogy yesterday. It's like I'm a car guy. I love muscle cars, and if I see a lowrider going down the street and it's perfect, immaculate, I'm going to appreciate it, but it doesn't mean I have to like it. So I have a lot of respect for him, but I don't like some of the things that he says, and some of he's like a little baby sometimes, and you know that's not the way a champion is. And 90% of the time, he's a great champion. But there's just some things that I'm not in favor of. But, hey, it makes him look like a heel, and you need a heel. And, you know, does it show a character turn? And, hey, could this be the thing that turns everybody, you know, puts everybody back in his corner, and even the people that didn't like him before put in his corner? Hey, absolutely. But at the end of the day, none of that matters. We're talking about one human being and their struggle with drugs, and I hope nothing but the best for Jon Jones.
Bill, we really appreciate the time you're giving us. We're going to wrap this up in 2 seconds. Before we do, we're going to do what's called the submission rated tap-out round. It's kind of like word association. We ask you a bunch of fun questions, and you answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right, favorite part of the Ready to Rumble movie?
Oh, favorite part of the Ready to Rumble movie? Hanging out with David Arquette. He was really cool.
Give us the worst spear that you've ever seen done by another wrestler and the best one. And before you answer, we have to say we can't believe that we saw the Big Show was doing a spear these days.
You're kidding. Is he?
He was. Yeah.
Oh, my God. Just pardon me for a second. I'm going to throw up. But, you know, in all honesty, I don't watch these guys. I don't watch wrestling. I don't watch these guys spear people. I can't do it. I just I can't answer that because I don't see other guys doing it.
You know, that's fair enough. I think a lot of fans feel the same way. Bill, ever consider returning to MMA commentary?
I'd love to, man, but you know it's tough. It's tough. I mean, all you got to do is look back at my commentating of Brock and his first fight. I mean, I'm one of the most unprofessional commentators because I throw a lot of emotion into it because, hey, man, he's my buddy. And he wins his first fight, I go ballistic. You know, totally unprofessional. But, you know, if I can't just sit and be myself and that's what is entailed, then I don't really want to do it. But would I enjoy it? Yeah, absolutely. Do I think it's going to happen? Who knows? But I would definitely welcome the opportunity because I'm much more knowledgeable, and you know, I look at it a little differently.
Absolutely. Now, Bill, Don Fry, I believe, recently stayed with you at your house. What's a typical night out like for Goldberg and Don Fry?
I ain't telling you that. There's no way I'm telling you what Don Fry and Goldberg do when they're at my house. That's impossible. All I can say is there's a lot of beer drinking, a lot of spitting, and a lot of cussing going on. That's
all right. We had Don Fry a few weeks ago. When we have him back on the show, we'll ask him. We'll find out. Now, whose idea was it for you to punch the limo window on that episode of Thunder? Apparently, the cut was so bad that the amputation was discussed, and it took you out of action for 5 months.
Mine. It was a pure act of fit of rage. That's all it was. That's all it was. I got in a confrontation with Scott Hall earlier in the night, and I wanted to rip his head from his body, and I took it upon myself to do something absolutely ignorant and go on the fly and try to be Superman. And you know, I unfortunately got hurt throughout the process, and you know, it's all good. I only came within a centimeter of losing the use of my arm.
Jesus.
But it was the highest rated segment on public television or cable television.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the best way to get the anger out. Now, we got to ask this, Bill, because fans would go ballistic if we didn't. Any chance at one last run in the WWE for Bill Goldberg?
Hey, if they want to do business and do it right, I'm more than willing to listen. If they want to continue to do what they've done with me in the past, I'd rather dig a ditch.
And finally, Bill, give us your favorite match from your career.
You know, DDP's match and mine was great because, I mean, he's such a technician and he studies the game, and he brought it to me once it was tailored down. It was like on 14 pages of paper, for God's sakes. I think he had me spearing him 112 times. You know, when I look back on it, my favorite matches were with, Rick Steiner was on my team most of the time, except for in Japan. I'd take him over there as my opponent. But working with Scotty was freaking awesome because he didn't cry. He's a bad dude. And I busted his orbital in the ring. And, you know, look back on it and you can see when it happened and you see my reaction. And, you know, God knows, I mean, it was the biggest slip up in the world. And I mean, I felt horrible right in the middle of the match. I go down to him on live TV and, you know, I'm asking him if he's all right. But he's one tough SOB, and he's athletically gifted, stronger than hell, and he's got the persona. He's a badass. And I loved going in there and ranging with him, man. It was awesome because you knew you were going to feel it afterwards, but you knew you'd done something. And it was great. It was very believable.
Wow, awesome. Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you guys. Don't forget to follow Bill on Twitter at Goldberg. And of course, check out Bill's show on Podcast One. It's called Who's Next. We highly recommend you listen to his interview with Don Fry. It's a lot of fun. And also, when's this Hoist Gracie episode dropping, Bill?
Let's see here. Next Tuesday, it will be Tim Brown from the Oakland Raiders. And then right after that will be Hoist Gracie.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely be sure to catch that one, guys. You should definitely do the same. Again, Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure, gentlemen. To all the fans out there, man, it was awesome to be in Australia when we were down there wrestling. That's one place that I definitely will always remember because the fans were just absolutely gracious. I remember staying 3 hours after a match. I wasn't the champ, and we stayed in the ring and signed autographs for everybody, and it was just the least we could do. The fans were wonderful.